Hello, dear friends. Monday, March 31st, 2025. It is a cloudy, overcast day today. Happy Monday. It's about 4 degrees centigrade Celsius and about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Just a beautiful spring day. It finally warmed up. It was like 0, 0, 0 for like 3 days in a row. Now we finally broken above 0 degrees, and it's actually quite nice and comfortable out. So we're making our way through A Shattered Visage. I looked up this book on Amazon, and it doesn't use this title in the latest versions. It just goes by The Real Face of Atheism. Anyway, Ravi Zacharias, A Shattered Visage. Today I'm covering chapter 4. Very excited because chapter 4 is a very powerful chapter. Not as much because of Zacharias' insights, although he does have excellent insights, but from the people that he's quoting from. And I'm hoping to share some of that with you. I hope I can get through it in one video, but I might have to break it up into 2 videos because it's such a powerful chapter. I was so excited. I go ahead and actually read chapter 5, jumping the gun, and chapter 5 was, in comparison, kind of disappointing and dismal and a little bit depressing, to use some alliteration there for you. But yeah, chapter 4 is just spectacular. So let's get into it. Let's see what jumps out at me, and I hope that you find it interesting. If you happen to be watching this 50 or 100 years from now and you're wondering what your great-grandpa was like and what he kept himself busy doing, this is part of my therapy. I don't do this to monetize anything. I simply do this to share possible insights for future students that may need this text in their studies, or maybe somebody who is interested in the topic of atheism may be interested in why atheism is a dead-end street, has nothing to offer the followers of that doctrine, and they have all kinds of reasons why they don't agree with me, and that's totally fine. So let's go. Chapter 4, Sisyphus on a Roll, it's called. Sisyphus on a Roll. Now, you know the story of Sisyphus. Ancient Greek mythology. He was banished because of his misdeeds to roll a hill up perpetually, roll a hill up, roll a rock up a hill and back down again in perpetuity for a useless endeavor he was forced to do. Sisyphus is the title of the chapter, Sisyphus on a Roll, and the topic of the chapter is the search for meaning. The search for meaning. This is the third difficulty that atheists face. The first one was the first cause, how you get something from nothing, and I've heard about arguments from a scientific perspective on both sides of that, which is a whole separate book to study if you want to, multiple books to study if you want to study the arguments for and against the possibility of first cause. And so we kind of skipped over that a bit. The second one was universal morality. That is a difficulty that's faced by atheism. And the third difficulty is the search for meaning. So this really could be called, the book could be called The Difficulties That Atheism Must Overcome, or that atheism encounters. That could be a subtitle for the book, because he's going through and he's, in each chapter, he is pulling out a topic that atheism has a difficulty addressing. Now, of course, if you ask atheists, they'll say, oh, we have no problem addressing that, but be that as it may, we'll see how we do. So chapter 4, Sisyphus on a Roll, and let's dig into it. In this chapter, he quotes many different people, and so I have to skip over most of them, but let's get into it. Page 72. The loss of a creator and the abandonment of a moral law leads to the third hurdle for atheism, as I mentioned, the search for meaning, and the lives of millions attest to its failure. And so he gives a nice anecdote here. I'd like to share this anecdote with you. He was teaching a course, and as he was teaching a course, he was doing some studies on man's search for meaning. I think it's a famous book by Viktor Frankl, and he was, expounding upon it. And a student rose up and said, everything in life is meaningless. So the student was listening to his teaching, and he got fed up. He said, everything in life is meaningless. And they kind of went back and forth a bit and said, no, it isn't. Yeah, yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yeah. And so he said, do you think your statement is a meaningful one? Because he said, everything in life is meaningless. He says, do you think your statement is a meaningful one? And then the student paused, and then he finally answered, yes. And so Zacharias said that if his assertion was meaningful, then everything in life was not meaningless. If, on the other hand, everything was indeed meaningless, then his assertion was meaningless too, and therefore, in effect, he had said nothing. Now, I know this is simple circular wordplay, but I thought it was a good anecdote, and the way he describes it is better than I can, so I'm not going to go all through it. But this leads him segue into his next description from Solomon. Now, this is the first time he actually mentions a biblical quote in his book, and he's already on page 74, and this is the first time he's actually mentioning something from Scripture. It's not even from the New Testament, it's from the Old Testament. He's quoting Solomon. And this is something that I don't think he's going to address in this book. Maybe he will, but mostly what he's addressing is the logical barriers that atheism faces. I believe there are also social and mental barriers. And this is one example, is that if you quote anything from the Bible to an atheist, they will immediately either discount it or completely ignore it. They won't even allow that into their mind as existing. That there's some people that are that, and I find especially the people from the UK, they've been indoctrinated from a child that the Bible is fairy tale. People from Scotland as well, but England and so on, they are taught that the Bible is a fairy tale. So whenever they hear anything, if they find out that it's from the Bible, they'll say, "Oh, that's a fairy tale." That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't follow the Bible. The Bible's not true. You can't listen to the Bible. And really, it's unfortunate because they exclude themselves from a lot of great literature. We know it's over 66 books in the Bible from over the span of hundreds of years, right? And different authors and so on. Some of it's poetry, and some of it is simply just letters. Some of it is prophetic utterances that people had, and so on and so forth. Parables, all kinds, And so it's unfortunate that they do cut themselves off, but I don't know if he's ever going to address those type of barriers or not, the social and mental barriers, but we'll see, and we'll continue on with, he goes. And so he does quote from Solomon. He says, Solomon ran into the same dilemma when he started to look at the futility of the universe from a scientific perspective, that because of entropy, it eventually just reached heat death, and there's a uniformity of nothingness and scattered atoms and so on. It gets pretty depressing. So Solomon said, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired." As you know, Solomon was the richest king of his day, and he, was successful in all his battles, and he amassed all this vast wealth and hundreds of wives and so on and so forth. He says, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun." And if you know these chapters from Ecclesiastes, you'll know that he keeps repeating that over and over again. Meaningless, meaningless, or the other way it's translated is vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Meaningless, meaningless, it's all meaningless. And Solomon has a whole section of his writings where he's talking like that. And Solomon found, as he says, there was a monotony, a circularity, a fatality to all human endeavor. And so he goes on to expound upon that particular topic in chapter 4, called Sisyphus on a Roll. And I'm not going to go too much more into detail because we have more to cover. How am I doing for time? Oh, gee whiz, I have to get through this a lot faster, so I'm going to have to skip over some parts. But as I said, excellent chapter. If you can get your hands on this book, get yourself a copy. It's very, very insightful, and it allows you to really reflect on a lot of excellent quotes from different writers throughout history that he quotes, like G.K. Chesterton and Wordsworth and these famous poets, and Lord Byron. Byron. It's not stuff that I studied in school, but you may have touched on it at different times. And then he does talk about the second law of thermodynamics briefly again, which is good. And here again, yes, he's quoting T.S. Eliot. So a lot of really excellent quotes from other Um, yeah, really, really good quotes from and also from Voltaire. You've probably heard of Voltaire, a French writer. Um, and I'm just going to finish by reading this quote. I guess I'm a little bit over time, but I'll just finish by reading this quote from Voltaire as he was trying to search for meaning. Voltaire says, "I'm a puny part of a great whole. Yes, but all sentient beings, born of the same law, suffer like me, and like me also die. The vulture fastens on his timid prey, and stabs with bloody beak the quivering limbs. All's well, it seems, for it. But in a while an eagle tears the vulture into shreds. The eagle is transfixed by shafts of man. The man, prone in the dust of battlefields, mingling his blood with dying fellow man, becomes in turn the food of ravenous birds. Thus the whole world in every member groans, all born for torment and for mutual death. And o'er this ghastly chaos you would say the ills of each make up the good of all. What blessedness! And as with quaking voice, mortal and pitiful, ye cry, all's well. The universe belies you, and your heart refutes 100 times your mind's conceit. What is the verdict of the vastest mind? Silence. The book of fate is closed to us. Man is a stranger to his own research. He knows not whence he comes, nor whither he goes. Tormented atoms in a bed of mud, devoured by death, a mockery of fate." So that's Voltaire speaking in his desperate search for meaning in life all through these things that he's witnessing. And it kind of parallels Solomon to a certain extent, this futility. And so he goes on to describe why the atheistic outlook of the randomness of the universe and the impersonal state of reality leads to despair. And he finishes the chapter by saying, "Atheism walks with its head down, earthbound, which is why it grasps nothing of eternal value. It must admit its predicament. Without God, there is no meaning to life." And earlier he quotes the famous quote from Pascal, who said that, there's a God-shaped vacuum in every heart of every man that only God can fill. Or even the quote from Augustine. Augustine said, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee." He's conversing with God at that time. And he's, so yeah, a lot of excellent quotes from other famous philosophers and writers and thinkers over the ages, from Solomon to Voltaire and a bunch in between, poets, T.S. Eliot and so on. And so we'll leave that for today. I'm glad I was able to get through that in a reasonable amount of time. I thought it was going to take me a lot longer because some of the quotes are very stirring and powerful and inspiring to realize that meaning is a very important part of the human experience. We want to find meaning in our lives, and when we have a outlook that excludes God or eternity or a hope beyond this particular reality, then we inevitably end up with despair and meaningless and so on and so forth, as these people described a lot better than I can. And so the other part of that, as he also mentions in detail, is the distractions that people will go to avoid having to face that reality of meaningless. The efforts of numbing our senses through alcohol, drugs, distractions, physical pleasures, hedonism, etc., to not have to face that and to distract ourselves so that never becomes a part. Just like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we are gone, so to speak. But anyway, that's for him to describe. But I hope that helps wherever you are, that it is important to consider these things. We're told from Scripture that we should seek God while he may be found, in a time that you have the time, right? Today is the day of salvation. It says that in a flood of many waters you won't find him. So in other words, again, that's from Solomon. He says, seek the Lord while you can, because when you're in desperate circumstances and you're about to fall off a cliff or something, Solomon basically says you're not going to find him when you're in an emergency, because people will naturally think, well, if I'm in an emergency, I'll call it to God and he'll rescue me. But that's not what Solomon recommended. He said the opposite. He said, look for God when you have time to seek him. And if we transpose that to the New Testament, it says, go in a quiet place, in the quietness of your heart. Go into your inner closet and seek God there and pour out your heart to him, and you'll find him if you seek him with all your heart. And so that's what I would recommend to you today, wherever you are, whether you're atheist. I know I do get some feedback from atheists on my channel sometimes, especially when I'm talking about the topic, of course. And so I welcome your feedback and your comments. I'm sorry I don't always reply, but I hope that as we move through this book and these different barriers that'll come up, obviously there's going to be 7 barriers because there's 7 chapters, and we've covered how many so far? 3 barriers. And I'll summarize them for you in the notes below. The next one, the 4th barrier, is coming up in the next chapter, called Grave Doubts, and of course it's dealing with the barrier of death. So that'll be a lot of fun and giggles, as they say, to deal with the topic called death. But we'll see, and we'll get through all 7 barriers, and hopefully it'll be helpful to somebody out there, or inspiring to them, or even if it just makes them think on how they can be a better person with whatever worldview that they happen to have decided to choose. Maybe it'll help somebody out there. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you, and don't forget to spend time with people you love, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon. Take care of yourself. Bye for now.